My name is Dan. I'm the Customer Learning and Development Consultant here at RightCapital, and I'm excited to be here with all of you today to talk more about presenting a financial plan in RightCapital. And this is one of our recurring training webinars, which we run each and every week here at RightCapital to help you get ramped up and comfortable using the system. In today's webinar, we'll be reviewing strategies and best practices for ways that you can leverage RightCapital in your client meetings and presentations. We want to be that visual backdrop for your planning conversations with clients. And RightCapital, gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of really tailoring your presentation approach to, at the end of the day, suit your unique practice and the needs of your unique clients. So we're going to talk about strategies that you can use when presenting to clients in person, over screen share using something like Zoom, and of course, generating PDF reports as well. In particular today, we're also going to be looking at a case study for a high net worth client. So in addition to some more general presentation tips, we'll also be diving a bit into some of the modules you might be more likely to use with high net worth clients. And we'll also be touching on some of the most common questions and what if scenarios that the high net worth demographic might focus on. So things like future asset purchases, property and business purchase goals, charitable giving perhaps, and qualified charitable distributions, legacy goals, asset location and other tax strategies, and of course, estate planning as well. So those are the specific focuses today in terms of the high net worth case study. But as I mentioned, we are also going to be focusing on some more general presentation tips and tricks as well. So we're going to touch on things like the blueprint module, the snapshot, and of course, the retirement analysis, which are really the three main modules that have proven to be popular and effective presentation tools for pretty much every client, regardless of net worth or demographic. All right, that being said, for those of you that might be new to RightCapital, as I switch over to my RightCapital screen here, I want to remind everyone that these webinars are interactive. There will be a live Q&A at the end of the presentation here today. And ultimately, I have some content prepared for you today, some questions prepared for you today, but I'd like to hear your questions as well. So if you do have any questions as we're making our way through the presentation, please don't hesitate to write in. You should find a Q&A field in the Zoom webinar control panel on your screen. I've got about 45 minutes of prepped content for you today, and then I will be answering your questions. So again, please don't hesitate to write in. I'm here to help however I can. So here we are in our case study for today for Bruce and Betty. And I want to kick things off here by taking some time to review the blueprint module within the profile area, just to help us get a little bit more familiar with these clients. So in the profile blueprint tab here, this is essentially where you'll find a consolidated summary of all of your profile inputs. So this takes all of the client's information, all of their assets and liabilities, all of their financial goals and those important milestones, as well as all of their income, expenses, and savings. And it recontextualizes all that information for us with some visuals that are a little bit more client-friendly. So just to review here, starting in the net worth tab, we can quickly and easily see this client's situation as of today. We can see their overall net worth currently sitting at $4.3 million. So, relatively high net worth. We can see the breakdown of their assets and liabilities here in terms of all of their investment accounts, their properties that they own. We see they have some equity compensation, a stock plan in here, as well as some additional assets. So we can see a breakdown of all of those assets and liabilities on one place to easily distinguish between who owns what. In the goals area, we have a timeline of the milestones and financial goals occurring within this plan. So this one tends to be relatively popular when it comes to presentations. It can be helpful to walk clients through when they can expect different key events to happen within their lives, from retirement age to healthcare costs kicking in to even long-term care near the end of their life. So this is definitely a popular tool to be aware of within the blueprint. And of course, we also have income, savings, and expenses. So this area is going to summarize all that information and put that all on one page for you so you can quickly and easily identify how much are these clients earning, what other income streams are they receiving or expecting down the road, what contributions are they making to their various investments, 401ks, HSAs, in this case, some backdoor Roth IRA contributions happening, as well as, of course, those general living expenses. So that was just a quick overview, but I'd like to start things off here in the blueprint module during these presentations because the blueprint is probably the best place to see every element of a client's current plan all in one place. And for that reason, a lot of advisors also like to use the blueprint as the starting point in their meetings or in their presentations to really set a solid foundation with clients and to help them better understand their current financial picture before we dive into their future financial picture. In terms of using this as a presentation tool, if you're going to be presenting to clients in the RightCapital software, either in person or over screen share like we're doing here today, there are a couple of pro tips that I want to make sure I touch on here. Firstly, this is something that can be customized in terms of the visuals. So if you find yourself maybe needing to hide something that we don't need to see for one reason or another, you can always click the edit button in the upper right here, and that's going to allow you to choose what items will populate within this graph. So maybe we want to hide some of those credit cards, only some small balances there. We might not need to see them on this net worth breakdown. We can choose to hide those here. I always like to mention when you uncheck these boxes within this area, it doesn't remove these items from the plan. So these will still be factored into the financial plan and into the retirement projections. We're really just hiding them from the visuals here in the blueprint area. So it's more of a cosmetic change, so to speak, within this area of the presentation. I also want to mention that this can be a useful place to make changes and add new items to a client's plan as well. So if you're reviewing this information with a client, especially maybe if that client did some of their own data entry and maybe you're reviewing this with them for the first time, this can be a useful place to sort of spot check those inputs. And if you need to make any adjustments, it's very quick and easy to do so. So, maybe we're looking at an account here and we notice that one of the balances isn't looking quite right. It's relatively easy to click into these tiles. We can make an update to the balance, whatever that might be, click save. That's not only going to update the blueprint here, it's going to update all of the projections across the entire client plan to account for that change. So it can be a great place to correct some typos or mistakes if those were made during the data entry process by clients. I also want to mention this is also somewhere we can add new items. So maybe we're reviewing this with these clients and they mention maybe there's a goal that's not being accounted for here. In a case like this, maybe these clients have a legacy goal, a certain dollar amount that they want to leave behind for their kids or grandkids and the rest of their heirs. We can add something like that directly to the goals area of the blueprint. So it sort of saves us the trouble of having to click around between the different areas of the profile and update those individual data entry cards. You can simply click add that legacy goal. And just like before, this will also update all of the plan projections. So not only will this add the legacy goal to the blueprint, it's going to update the entire plan to account for that new goal. So at the end of the day, with the blueprint here, you have quite a lot of flexibility to make changes, add new items on the fly without necessarily having to click around between those different profile areas and update those individual data entry inputs within your client meetings. Great. So after reviewing the client's current picture here in the blueprint, the place that a lot of advisors will go next in their meetings is the retirement analysis. This is probably the most well-known module in all of RightCapital, and that's for good reason. The retirement analysis is essentially your playground for modeling what-if scenarios, playing around with specific variables, and ultimately, making specific recommendations as part of a client's proposed plan. And for that reason, it's certainly become a staple for many advisors when it comes to presenting those recommendations to clients and really highlighting the value of those recommendations on the client's plan as a whole. So first and foremost, I want to start by touching on the action items here in the retirement analysis. These are really designed to be dynamic. so that as you're having conversations with your clients, you can quickly and easily make changes in the moment and see the impact on the plan in real time. So, as you can imagine, this can be incredibly useful, especially if you have clients that maybe turn to you with unexpected questions. Let's walk through a quick example here, and then we can dive into more specific examples for this case study. So, just a quick and easy example. Maybe we're looking over this with Bruce and Betty. They're relatively happy with this 99% probability of success, and they turn to you and ask, maybe we can retire a little bit earlier. How is that going to impact our probability of success? We can make adjustments to the retirement ages very quickly here. Click the refresh button in the lower right, and it'll recrunch the numbers. We'll be able to see the impact of those specific changes on the client's plan as a whole. So even if they were to retire a couple of years earlier in this case, still sitting at a solid 97% probability of success. So like I said, that's a simple example, but the retirement analysis is also where we can start to answer some questions and model some what ifs that are a little bit more specific to this case study for our higher net worth clients. Firstly, something that we're able to do here, if you'll remember, I added a legacy goal back within the goals area of the blueprint module. That's something that we can play around with here as well. So if we click the edit button in the lower right, we'll be able to find not only the legacy goal, but all of our profile inputs. So if you ever need to change a specific input that you're not seeing on the action item screen, you can always find that here, check that box, and that's going to be added to the action item display, allowing you to make changes to that item. So for something like the legacy goal, maybe the clients are wondering, how much can we, afford to leave behind for our heirs and still maintain maybe a 90% or 85% probability of success. So you can play around with those numbers and ultimately back into something that your clients are satisfied with in terms of probability of success and, of course, the legacy goal itself. Another common what if for higher net worth clients would be future asset purchases. And there are a couple different types of asset purchases that we can model here in the retirement section. So again, for this, we're going to click into the edit button in the lower right. In addition to editing existing items coming from the profile inputs, we also have the ability to add new items here. So if a client turns to you and asks, what does our plan look like if we purchase a new vacation home? What if we purchase a lifestyle asset like a new boat, for example, or even a business purchase if that's something your clients are considering? All of those items can be added here to the client's proposed plan. So let's add one of those items here. Let's maybe add a new vacation home purchase here. So we'll click the vacation home option. And if you're at all familiar with the data entry process in the profile, it's exactly the same process here in the retirement analysis. We can enter things like the purchase price for our vacation home, where that's going to be located, who's going to be the one purchasing that property. Of course, when do we want that vacation home purchase to occur within the projections? So we can dial in the time frame here, whether that's a calendar year or a specific retirement age. And then we can also finalize the rest of the details. Are they going to be buying that up front, or are they going to be maybe taking out a mortgage on that property? So, lots of flexibility here for the specifics of something like a vacation home purchase. Ultimately, once we click save, we'll be able to see the impact of that on our client's proposed plan. So, of course, some of you might be familiar with this already, but adding items here in the retirement analysis area. So you'll be able to tell that these items were added in this area because they'll be marked with a green dot here. So we can see that vacation home purchase I just added, marked by this green dot on the left side. That's an easy way to identify between profile inputs, things that the clients might already own, and things that we've added here as proposed items. So keep an eye out for that green dot as well. But of course, adding the items here in the retirement analysis will only add those items to the proposed plan, and it will not add those items to the current. So we can say, if you retire a little earlier, if you leave behind an extra $1 million for your kids, and if you decide to purchase that vacation home in 2034, you'll be sitting at an 86% probability of success compared to 99 without those changes. Another common one I want to make sure I touch on here is charitable giving goals. This is another one that can be added both in the profile for clients that might already be making charitable donations, but if that's something the clients are considering and want to see how it will impact their proposed plan, that's also something that can be added here in the retirement section. So if clients have questions about that, that's another thing that we can walk through with clients here in the retirement analysis. And the process to add those is relatively similar. We'll start by clicking that edit button. We'll click add new items in the lower left again, and you will find that under the goals area here. You'll find both personal gifts as well as charitable giving. So for now, we're going to stick with charitable giving, but you do have the flexibility to model both. This goal card can be a great way to say, what if we donate a certain amount of assets or a certain amount of cash to, charity, to maybe a donor advised fund for those tax benefits. So lots of flexibility here. Of course, just like every other input in RightCapital, we can determine the dollar amount of that goal, as well as the timing. When do we want that to begin? If we were going to be modeling something like QCDs from an IRA, maybe we'd want to line that up with when RMDs begin. So, we can always intentionally select the client's RMD age here and make sure that the timing is exactly what we want to see for that specific charitable giving goal. So again, lots of flexibility here to model all of these different what if scenarios for clients and ultimately show clients the impact that that will have on their retirement projections. So, of course, that's just some examples that I had prepared for you here today. Like I said, I'd love to hear some examples from you all. If you have things you want me to model here, definitely write into the Q&A. I will be circling back near the end of the presentation. And if you want me to model something specific here, maybe some specific questions that your clients tend to have, let me know, and we can definitely circle back and walk through those inputs. All right. So, with that said, before moving on from the retirement analysis, I do want to make sure to also touch on the strategies column. In particular, there's a couple modules that we're going to look at today for our high net worth case study. But in general, the strategies column of the action items is where we can start to implement some more specific strategies for different elements of that client's plan. So things like debt management strategies, student loan strategies, and for our purposes today, tax strategies, as well as stock plan strategies. So I want to take a look first at the tax strategy and then the stock plan strategy. So starting with tax strategies, these are modeled in the aptly named tax strategies module in RightCapital. So that's something you can find within the tax tab. So let's click in there and take a look at what I've modeled here. This area allows you to model a couple of different tax strategies for clients. You may be aware of this area because this is typically where you would model something like Roth conversions for clients. So if you do want to take a look at a Roth conversion strategy, this is the area we can make that happen. For our case study today, I've actually modeled what's called an asset location strategy. So there is a particular chart that I like to use to demonstrate this a little bit. And this tends to be a strategy. This can be a valuable strategy for anyone, but generally speaking, tends to be more beneficial for higher earners, people in those higher tax brackets. So what this strategy does is essentially say, how do we want to allocate the equity portion of a client's overall asset allocation? How do we want to spread out their equity between all of their accounts, between the different tax buckets, taxable, tax deferred, and tax free? And in case you haven't heard of this strategy, I do find that there are lots of great resources out there. I know that Vanguard has a great breakdown. Charles Schwab has a great breakdown of asset location. So if you're unfamiliar with the strategy, definitely take a quick look at some of those resources. But at a high level, the concept here is that we want to match tax inefficient assets with tax efficient account buckets. So for a client like this, they might benefit from front loading their taxable and tax-free accounts with equities and saving their tax-deferred accounts as much as possible for bonds and those fixed income asset classes to take advantage of the tax benefits of those types of accounts. So that's generally speaking how this strategy works. We can see that, I've loaded up the tax-free bucket here, all of the Roth accounts with as much equity as possible. Some of that's overflowing into the taxable bucket. We have some cash in our taxable bucket as well. And then the remainder ends up in the tax deferred. So we can see, using this asset location chart, a nice breakdown of how that equity is being split between these tax buckets. And ultimately, we see our clients do benefit from this strategy, in terms of ending assets, in terms of taxes paid, and also in terms of withdrawals from their tax deferred accounts. And if this is something that we wanted to implement into the client's retirement plan and make sure that that's being factored into their proposal, all we need to do is turn on that tax strategy, switch over from current strategy to tax proposal, and we can show clients the before and after. So that can definitely be really powerful for modeling something like an asset location strategy for these higher net worth clients. This one's a little more situational, but if you do have clients with equity compensation in the form of stock options, maybe you have clients who are receiving grants like RSUs, NQOs, maybe a significant portion of their income potentially is in the form of equity compensation if they're a high level executive somewhere. This is something that we can also model strategies for within the stock plans module. So in this plan, I've entered some Google RSUs just as a quick example for us here. But in general, the stock plans module is going to allow us to do two things here. It's going to show us a breakdown of the client's stock plan and all of their grants so that we can walk through with the client. Here's where you're at today. Here's the total value of all of the grants that you've received. And here's the total vested and total unvested dollar value of those grants. So we can really break things down that way. We can take a look at when this client's grants will be fully vested, so we can easily identify that point in time. And then ultimately, what we can also do is dial in a strategy for clients. Maybe if you have clients that aren't quite sure what the optimal choices to make are surrounding their stock options when it comes to, when do I exercise those? Should I exercise those right away, or should I wait to exercise those until a specific time? When should I liquidate those? Should I liquidate them now, after a year potentially for that long-term gains tax treatment, or again at a specific year? So we can model lots of different strategies here for exercise and liquidation for our grants. And you'll notice if you click the edit button here, you can even show clients the benefits potentially of things like cashless exercise and 83B elections. So if they have grant types that are eligible for those strategies, you're able to show clients the benefits there as well. So lots of flexibility here depending on the client's needs and the specific type of grants that the client is receiving. Ultimately, just like our tax strategies, this also is able to be imported into the retirement analysis. So you'll notice I already have it turned on, but back here in the retirement analysis area, we can walk through that stock plans module with clients and show them, here's the dollar value of all of your vested and unvested shares. Here's what we'd recommend in terms of when to exercise and liquidate those to reap the benefits in the long term. And then ultimately, how is that going to impact our plan as a whole? So we can turn that on, click the refresh button, and immediately see the impact on the probability of success. So I know that was quite a lot of information in not a lot of time here, but just to summarize, the retirement analysis is a great page for advisors who do prefer a little bit more of a conversational approach when you present. If you want your presentations to be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interactive, this can be a great area to use. There's a lot of great comparison visuals here across the different modules, so we can really take a look at current versus proposed and see the major differences in invested assets, taxes, and so on. And this can be a great way, ultimately, to help hammer home the value of your recommendations and the positive impacts on the plan as a whole. I will say today's presentation is a little bit more focused on presenting to clients. So, I had a lot of these strategies dialed in advance today, but if you are looking to take a deeper dive into anything I've touched on here, your charitable giving, asset location and tax strategies, stock plans, definitely take a look at our help center. You'll find a great overview of all of those areas and great tips and tricks for leveraging those tools to build strategies for your clients. So definitely feel free to take a look at our help resources. All right. The last module I want to touch on here today is the snapshot module. So This is the last sort of general module, I'd say, that tends to be useful for presenting across the board, regardless of your client demographic. And the reason for that is that this is really RightCapital's version of a one-page report. The idea here is that we can pull all of the key information from across all of the different areas of the client plan and ultimately showcase all of that in one place and walk through that with the client in order. So just to highlight some key features here, this is something that can be customized for each and every client. So we can drag and drop these items into a specific order. If there's something we might not need to see for a specific client, we can always remove that item from the snapshot here. And of course, you'll be able to add additional items as well, depending on what you need to see. So definitely take a look through these items. There's a lot of great information that can be added here depending on the talking points that you're planning to touch on with clients in those meetings. So, don't hesitate to take a look through these items. And of course, you can always take a look at our help resources as well for more. All right. Like I said, that's the last of the sort of high level general tips I wanted to touch on today. The next thing I want to touch on is a little bit of a different approach to presenting. So some of these modules we've been looking at here, retirement analysis, snapshot, these are a little bit more, dynamic approaches to presenting. They're meant to be a little bit more fluid depending on the conversation that you're having with your clients. But of course, there are a lot of advisors who prefer something a little bit more structured. So the next thing I'm going to show us how to do here is actually rearrange the order of the planning modules and be a little bit selective with what planning modules are included in the plan so that when we open the plan to present to that client, we know exactly what modules we have and in exactly what order. And we can click through those in a specific way and really walk clients through everything we're looking to present to them in a very specific order. So for this, I'm going to start by clicking into the advisor portal. So back where we started, this is where you'll find, of course, your book of business in RightCapital, but it's also where we can sort of curate that presentation view. So step one is to click, find the client on the left side and click on their name. Step two is to click into the planning access tab on the far right. And then the third step would be to walk through this checklist and decide which modules do we want to see and in what particular order. So, I mentioned a lot of advisors like to start by looking over that blueprint module. That's certainly something we can do first by checking that box and then dragging that to the top of the page. So let me just drag that to the top here. Maybe we also want to look at that snapshot for the high-level overview. Maybe we want to see the retirement analysis for the before and after, the what-if scenarios. We can check off some of those modules that are a little more specific to this case study. So maybe tax strategies like we looked at and the stock plans module as well. And I am also going to check off here the estate analysis. This is the one module specific to this case study that we haven't touched on yet. So I'm going to include this in the presentation view here, and we can walk through that as well. So ultimately, once you've made your selections and rearranged the order to your liking, you can click Save in the lower right. And then instead of opening this plan normally by clicking the Open Client button, I'm instead going to click this arrow next to that button and open this plan in client access mode. And what this is going to do is essentially impersonate the perspective that we've just dialed in using those items. So we can see right off the bat here, we've significantly cut down on the number of planning modules. So we don't have to worry about remembering where all the information is that we're wanting to touch on in that plan. We can guarantee that each and every module here is relevant to a specific talking point for that presentation. So there's some value there. We also see that the order is different. So we can walk clients through specific information in a specific order. So we can start things off by saying, here's where you are today. Here's your current net worth, all of your financial goals, and all of your income, savings, and expenses. Here's a high-level look at all of the key information across all different facets of your plan, from your balance sheet to your tax rate to your current allocation and tax allocation. So lots of value here. We can, of course, pivot into that retirement analysis module to answer those client questions and model those what-if scenarios. even show them some of the strategies we've modeled for them in terms of something like an asset location strategy, and really explain to the client, if they're curious, the mechanics behind, why are we doing that, and what value is that going to have for me in the long term. And of course, the module I've added here that I want to make sure I touch on is the estate analysis. So this, of course, can be used for any client that you might have that's in the process of putting together an estate plan, but especially for those higher net worth clients that really want to see, once I'm gone, where's all my money going? How much are my heirs going to inherit? How much am I giving to charity potentially? What assets are included in my taxable estate versus potentially being held outside of my taxable estate in different kinds of trusts and so on. So again, certainly valuable to be able to include this module in a presentation for those high net worth clients. Just to provide a quick overview, this flowchart is probably the main piece here. We can walk clients through, what's happening after the end of their plan. Who's passing away first? What does their taxable estate look like at the time that they pass in terms of real estate, investments, insurance, annuities, and other assets? So you can click into these tiles to zoom in for more details. If you have clients that are concerned about estate taxes, maybe they're worried that they're going to be hit by some estate taxes at either the federal or state level, that's something you'll be able to identify in this module. So it looks like these clients are just skating by under that threshold. But, if you did have clients that were being hit with estate taxes, that's identifiable here. And of course, we can isolate how much are my heirs going to receive at the end of the day. So we can identify that at the bottom here. Just like the retirement section, you of course can model some different what if scenarios here. What if we passed away at different times? How's that going to impact the flow of assets and the total to heirs? What if our funeral expenses or probate expenses are a little bit different? And the thing I want to touch on here today is you also have the ability to propose trust strategies for clients. So if that's something that your clients have questions about, or maybe something that you're planning to recommend to a client, shifting some of their assets from their taxable investments inside of their taxable estate to a trust outside of their taxable estate to shelter some of those assets, this is where we can show clients what that looks like. So I actually have one modeled here already. I've added a proposed credit shelter trust to the estate analysis here. And this is a simple example, but I've set this up to transfer $1 million from their taxable investments into this credit shelter trust in the same year that Bruce retires. And I've set this up to also pay out some income over the course of Bruce's lifetime as well. So $25,000 in distributions starting in that same year through the remainder of Bruce's life. So again, simple example, but for our purposes today, it allows us to see the impact. And once we've added these proposed trust strategies, these can be turned on and off. So we can show clients the before and after. Here's what it looks like without those assets. And then if we, include that trust strategy, we can see, money being moved outside of their taxable estate. And ultimately we see a small increase as well in the total to heirs as a result of that. So, we can show clients the impact of sheltering their assets in that way. I will mention there are some additional visuals here. So if you want to show clients some comparisons between, the before and after of modeling some of these different what ifs, from planning horizons to proposed trust strategies, we can see proposed versus current. Of course, we have that more traditional table view of all of that information. So if you prefer, not having to click into those individual tiles to see some details, if you'd rather have everything laid out for you on a single page, the details tab is very useful there. And of course, the trust tab here is where we can actually see, what's happening with the trust we've proposed. We can see exactly when that's being funded. We can see the returns, the fees, and the distributions over time after that point in the plan, and ultimately, the beginning and ending balances as well. All right. So that covers it for the estate module here. It also somewhat covers it for client access mode. I do want to make sure to sort of wrap this part up by saying the client access method of presenting here, it really makes the most of the visuals in RightCapital. It allows you to use RightCapital as more of the visual backdrop to help clients understand both their current financial situation as well as their future situation and the value of those recommendations you're making. I do want to quickly mention as well, you may notice that in the lower right corner here, there's no longer a chat bubble like we saw before when we opened this plan normally. So that's an additional, feature of using client access mode. If you are someone that likes to use our chat feature to ask our support team questions, that's certainly a fantastic option for you. But at the same time, you may not necessarily want a message from our support team popping up on your screen in the middle of a presentation. So if you want to avoid that from happening, opening the plan in client access mode will temporarily turn off that feature so you can rest easy knowing that that won't happen. Great. So I want to make sure I leave enough time for questions here, folks, but I do have one more thing that I'd like to touch on before we dive into the Q&A, and that's going to be generating reports in RightCapital. So of course, while presenting to clients in software is certainly becoming an increasingly popular way to present these days, there are of course many advisors that prefer that tried and true PDF report. And of course, it can be useful to have in addition to an in-software presentation so you can hand your client something to walk away with, to remind them of all the things you touched on. So we're going to walk through how you can generate those reports, how you can customize those to suit the specific client that you're working with, and then we'll dive into the Q&A. So to download those reports, all you need to do is click into the gear icon in the upper right of a plan, and you will find a report tab here. And actually, downloading reports is relatively similar to what we just looked at in terms of client access mode. It's a pretty similar checklist, and this functions in a pretty similar way. So the idea here is we choose which modules we want to include in the report, whatever those may be. We can choose the order that we'd like those to be reflected. So again, maybe we want that blueprints to be the first thing we see. We can always drag that to the top. Let's go ahead and check off some of those more specific modules to, what we touched on in today's presentation so we can see what those look like in report form. So let's go ahead and check off stock plans, estate analysis. I also want to highlight some of these items that are underlined. These can actually be clicked into to be a little more selective with which areas of that module you'd like to include in that report. So maybe we don't need every single piece of the tax strategies module, for instance. Maybe we just want to focus in on that asset location strategy. That's certainly something we can do. So keep that in mind. When you see these underlined sections, you can be a little bit more selective with those. Ultimately, with our selections dialed in, we can click Download Selected Pages in the lower left. That's going to download that PDF file to your computer. And once that loads here, we can actually open that up and take a look together. So, of course, we have our cover page, but if we skip ahead a little bit, we see the blueprint. So those same visuals we looked at in the blueprint area in terms of the net worth, the timeline of their goals, and of course, their income, savings, and expenses. We can take a look at the retirement analysis, the before and after, and proposed versus current, and all of those changes that have been made between the two. We can look at, if I scroll down a little bit here, the snapshot and see what that looks like in PDF format. And of course, we have our tax strategies, so we can take a look at that asset location chart here, see some of the same visuals, the estate analysis, walking through that flow of assets, and ultimately, the stock plans module as well, walking through, the grants that clients received. So all those same areas we looked at today in PDF form here within the report. All right. One last thing I want to touch on here related to a couple things we looked at today, the reports, planning access, and even the snapshot module. You do have the ability to create templates for some of these items, which can really help save you some time when it comes to generating reports for clients and preparing to present to clients. So I want to make sure to touch on templates here to wrap things up, and then I'll answer your questions. So real quick look at templates. In this area of your advisor portal, you can create templates for things like reports, planning access layouts, snapshot layouts, and even some additional things here. So just walking through some of these, The process of creating these templates is the same as creating reports themselves. What modules do we want to include and in what order? So, you can pre-save specific templates for specific demographics. So maybe we want to have a template saved in advance for those high net worth clients. We can make our selections here. We can have that saved, and that's going to save us some time when it comes to generating those reports within the client plan. Rather than having to make those selections for each and every client, you'll be able to quickly select the template and just download that report in a couple clicks. We can do the same thing for planning access. So maybe we want to create a template for those high net worth clients, and maybe we have a specific set of modules that we want to walk through with that general group of clients. We can make those selections, we can save that template, and of course, we can quickly and easily apply that template to those clients right before that meeting as well. So, very quick and easy to select the modules we want right before those presentations. Last but not least, we can do the exact same thing for the snapshot page. So I do actually have, a couple more general examples of some clever things that I've seen advisors do with the snapshot page here. So I do always like to showcase these. These aren't necessarily specific to our high net worth case study today, but I've seen advisors use the text boxes within the snapshot to leave clients notes, a welcome message perhaps with some contact info, maybe even a calendar link. So that's certainly something nifty that you can do with the snapshot module here. I've seen advisors make use of notes in pretty clever ways. You can pair, specific pieces of information with customized notes for that client with, specific talking points from those client meetings and really have, this be tailored to each and every client household that you're working with. So this is certainly something you're able to do as well with the snapshot. But of course, if you do have a specific set of items and a specific layout that you like to use for different client demographics, you can always create templates for that. You can name these whatever you'd like. And ultimately, you can make those selections and just like planning access, apply those templates to those clients right before those presentations.